Yes. I trust you've been reassured that these things happen and you shouldn't hold it against yourself.
Certainly, sir. Yeah.
HN25, I just want to return to a topic, something you mentioned earlier on in your evidence this morning. When we were talking about intelligence on terrorist activity, and you said that, just to quote you, this is from the transcript, I do think that there were people, yes, that I would say have assisted terrorists, definitely, in Troops Out movement. Without mentioning any names, and do take your time, how could you say that you definitely would say, how did you know that? What was the basis for that knowledge?
I was once tasked to do something.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to go into any details of it, but my point is, did you hear anything from members of Tom or see anything from members of Tom that led you to believe or that showed you that they were involved?
No.
You didn't witness anything firsthand?
No.
And you didn't even hear anything secondhand, as in someone else in Tom telling you that someone else?
No, I mean, they wouldn't say those things.
HN25, we'll move on now to subversion very briefly. And you didn't understand, or at least your understanding of your deployment was that it didn't have a subversive focus. Is that correct?
The group I was targeted at, I wouldn't regard as having a particularly subversive nature in that respect.
Can I ask briefly, what was your understanding of subversion at the time?
The overthrow of the democratic process.
And how did you gain that understanding?
It was basically I suppose doing special branch exam, you would do definitions and things like that and subvert.
Before we begin, an order has just been made by me which requires that no transmission or communication of the information referred to in the annex to the order is to be made public. The annex to the order is available to be seen. I don't propose to read it out now.
HN25. Before the break, we were talking about a report relating to the arrest of members of TOM, relating to an activity there, unfurling of a banner, you say, that they intended to do to mark Gorbachev's visit in April 1989. And I was just asking you why you reported on the fact they planned to sue the police for false arrest and false imprisonment. So I just asked that question again.
I thought it's something the police would like to know about.
Why?
If they carry through with it, all well and good, they'll know then. But if they didn't, then it shows you how they were feeling at the time, that they really felt that the police had overstepped their position.
So you were warning the police?
Yes,
essentially.
yeah, yes.
Do you know what happened as a result of that? Did they launch a formal complaint?
They might have done. I can't really remember.
Did you consider the propriety, HN25, of reporting on possible legal action that members of a group were going to take to the police?
Legal privilege, are you getting at?
Yes, and just the ethical propriety of this as well, but yes.
No, I was happy with it because, as I say, the police would get to hear about it sooner or later if they were being sued. And if they weren't, then I think it showed that the fact that that in such a situation, it is very, very difficult to know what to do when you have the political side of things and you have an incoming state visit.
Could you see that you were giving the police an advantage there, in essence, though? Because if they knew it was coming, then they might be able to alter their response or change their response
Not really, because
in order to fend it off.
I'd hope they'd be telling the truth and that there would be no change to how they were going to respond to it.
In relation to this incident, you say in your witness statement that the information you provided about this planned action prevented national embarrassment during a high-profile visit. When you say national embarrassment, do you mean an incident that would have been embarrassing for the government?
Yes.
And did you see it as part of your role as an SDS officer to prevent embarrassment to the government?
Not just the government, but to the United Kingdom. And of course it's the United Kingdom's government, but they've been voted in, so no, I didn't.
We'll look now at your reporting on justice campaigns, HN25. We'll look at the mentions you've made in your reporting of the Broadwater Farm Defence Campaign. And this was a campaign that was reviewing the convictions of three men who are known as the Tottenham Three: Winston, Silcott, Mark Braithwaite and Engin Rahip. That's correct, yes?
Yes.
And they were convicted of murdering PC for the murder of PC Keith Blakelock on the 6th of October 1985. But the campaign, so it was seeking justice for those three men, but it also sought to address wider issues of injustice and racism. Is that your understanding of it?
Yes.
You say that your focus, well, you weren't deployed into this group, but you came into contact with them through your activities with Tom.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And in your witness statement, you say that the reason for reporting on this group was public order and providing information to the Metropolitan Police about the levels of support for the group and the mood of its members. and this is a quote from your witness statement, you say, "The murder of PC Keith Blakelock was fresh in my mind, and I was keen to do anything to make the job of uniformed officers more straightforward. I trusted that the information would be used to police more sensitively where possible, while maintaining the capability for a robust response if that was required." So I'd just like to unpack that a little with you. First, the murder of PC Blakelock was fresh in your mind. You say it was fresh in your mind and you were keen to do anything to make the job of uniformed officers more straightforward. How was reporting on this justice campaign going to make their job more straightforward, in your view?
Well, I could get an idea of the support for the campaign, so when there were demonstrations, how many people might be attending, and also how many people from Tom would be attending, because it was all part of what was seen as an anti-colonial broad front, Ireland being the original colony
Right.
in the view of Tom.
So that's the reason for
That
the
is the
alliance between
tie-up,
the two.
why, yeah.
And was it also because Tom were interested in anti-racist campaigns?
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah, absolutely.
And they supported anti-racist campaigns for the reason that
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
were anti-racism.
Yeah.
When you say that you trusted the information you provided would be used to police more sensitively, what do you mean by that?
Well, the more information you've got, the better you're able to tailor a police response. And my view was obviously the police would like to know as much information as they can so they could deal with a demonstration and it would help it go off peacefully as far as possible.
So when you say sensitively, you mean just sensitive in terms of the number of police that would be deployed to a demonstration, or do you mean specifically in relation to a campaign group that believes that the police are racist? It might enable them to deal with that sensitivity.
Both.
Again, how did you believe that that reporting on the group would allow them to interact more sensitively with
Well,
the
numbers.
black community who were supporting this campaign?
Well, if I report something, it's taken out of my provenance, out of my care, and I would hope that any information I gave would make it a lot easier for the uniformed stroke divisional officers that are actually going to police it. And if I can give them things as to numbers, as to mood, I don't see how that could possibly be of detrimental effect.
Was there a concern that the activity of the group, that the protests of the group might become disorderly?
There was always a possibility, yes, with any demonstration which is very emotive.
Can I ask you this? In your reporting on this group, and we'll go to a specific example in a minute, but you refer to the three men, the Tottenham Three, as the convicted murderers of PC Blakelock. Can I ask you this? Did you believe that these men were guilty of the murder of PC Blakelock?
Well, they've been sentenced at court, so yes.
And that was the view in the MPS generally, in Special Branch, as far as you're aware?
Yes.
Was it your view that the Broadwater Farm Defence Campaign believed these men to be guilty, but just sought their release, and that they were campaigning in bad faith? Was that something you thought?
I'd say it was impossible to really gauge. I'd say there's a lot of people there who thought they were innocent. Whether there were some amongst them that thought they were guilty, I don't know. But I certainly think there were people who thought them innocent, yes.
Right, okay. So, but was there any part of you that thought that because they were campaigning for the release, or the people in the group, because they were campaigning for the release of these men, they actually might be sympathetic to the murder for the fact of the murder of PC Blakelock?
Sorry, how?
Sorry, I didn't put that very well. So the idea is that this group, or members of this group, were actually glad that PC Blakelock was murdered and were supportive of it, and they just sought the release of the men because actually they didn't think they'd done anything wrong.
I saw no signs of gladness that PC Blakelock had been killed.
Can I bring up a report, please? It's UCPI 23770. So that's at C63. It's a report dated the 18th of October 1988. This is notification of a picket of Wormwood Scrubs organised by the Broadwater Farm Defence Campaign. And paragraph 3, if we could go to that, refers to the leaflet advertising the picket. And it reads, it's a little way into it, but it says, of particular interest is the call for solidarity between black political activists and those campaigning for a united Ireland. Why did you consider this to be of particular interest?
It goes back to my previous statement that the idea was to build a broader anti-colonial front, that many of the arguments that appertained to Northern Ireland appertain to the position of black people in the United Kingdom, that they were all victims of.
And why was there
Empire.
interest in that? Because there was concern that that might become a mass movement?
Quite possibly. I'm saying this now, several years later. Whether people realistically thought it was going to become a mass movement, it is impossible to say at that time. I certainly didn't think it would, but I'm not a person with second sight, so I wouldn't be able to.
But were you aware there was a particular interest from STS management and Special Branch in alliances between?
Yes, because it could
Asian.
reflect itself in public order, greater numbers.
Right. If we could bring up another report, please, if we take that one down and bring up UCPI 23772. So that's at C69. This is a report dated the 13th of December, 1988. And this is the actual picket itself, organised by the Broadwater Farm Defence Committee. And attendees included Tony Benn, you reported this, Stafford Scott, George Silcott and Dave Morris. And you state that approximately 150 people attended. Can I ask, do you know, was John Dines on this picket?
I don't, from what I can remember, I don't think I saw him there, if he was there. No, I didn't see him.
So you can't assist us with...
No, not at all. I couldn't say if he was there or not, but I certainly do not remember seeing him.
You state approximately 150 people in attendance with, as expected, a large number of ethnic minorities. Why did you report that?
Again, because it shows you the level of support within a 150-person group. Whether that means that there's going to be a greater number of people of ethnic minority extraction than otherwise. It gives an indication, again, going back to this colonial, anti-colonial front, I suppose a rough idea of where the major support lies.
Well,
if indeed,
depending
on obviously the issue that's the source of the demonstration.
Sorry, if we can just, a little bit further down that paragraph, it reads, the picket, it's about 12 lines down, the picket was extremely voluble and frequent chants included those of racist police, racist courts and British justice, no justice. Chants proclaiming the innocence of the three was seemingly contradicted by a song declaring them to be am a warrior. There were half-hearted attempts to widen the perspective of the picket with chants relating to the Guildford 4, Birmingham 6, Plaistow 5, as well as Trevor Monaville and Viraj Mendis defence campaigns. Police were roundly accused of murdering Cynthia Jarrett, shooting Cherry Gross and raping Privacy. Sharon Raghib spoke of her hopes and promised to picket Wormwood Scrums until her husband won his release. I don't need to read the rest. Can I ask, just looking first at the bit about the song that the point you seem to be making, you're saying that chants proclaiming the innocence of the three were contradicted by a song declaring them to be am warrior. What did you mean by that? Did you mean that they were suggesting the men were warriors for killing PC Blakelock, and so therefore that showed that they actually did think they were guilty?
Not necessarily, but it definitely, what I was trying to get through there was the fact whichever way it is looked at, a police officer died in those circumstances, and he was killed. And that's what I'm taking there, that they are talking that death had happened there. I don't know it's necessarily saying that the three individuals were the ones who did it, but they are certainly saying that within that, on that night, he was killed by what I took some to feel was a community action.
Sorry, but you mean they were celebrating it in this song?
Yes.
But that's just your interpretation, is it fair to say? Like, there was
yes,
not something.
Certainly, but I don't see what else you would be singing that for.
You continue in this report, police were roundly accused of murdering Cynthia Jarrett, shooting Cherry Gross and raping Privacy.
Mm.
Would you agree that, I mean, in conjunction with the comment above and this, that your tone here is very flippant and it's quite dismissive? Would you accept that?
I think I'm making a point, these things happened, so I don't really apologise for those things. I don't know that it's flippant, but what I am saying is there does seem to be a dislocation between something which is about innocence and a lack of justice and a phrase, "am a warrior."
I suppose what I'm asking you is, do you think that your own bias here affected the way you reported on this group, in the sense that you were quite hostile to this group because the police were quite hostile to the group, to the cause especially, and that then led you to report on them in a disparaging way?
I don't think I'm being disparaging. I'm just saying what I saw there. I don't know that I'm being disparaging. I wouldn't accept that.
The convictions of these three men, as we know, were overturned just after you left the SDS, and actually just before, sorry. And the Court of Appeal found that their interrogations, the notes of the interrogations, had been tampered with. Can I ask, when this happened, did that cause you to revise your view of the group at all? Or the fact of your your reporting on them?
I can't say I considered it because obviously these reports were in the system by then. Obviously the individuals have been found not guilty, so that is, in my opinion, the end of the matter.
But what I mean is your attitude to the group. When they'd been vindicated, did you then regret reporting on them in the way that you did? Well, reporting on them at all, but also in the way that you did.
As I say, I when this happened, I'd forgotten I'd even reported on them. But yes, it's happened. They've been found not guilty. And obviously, if I'd known that, then I wouldn't be reporting on them.
So your reporting on them was linked to... OK, fine. We'll move on. If we can go now to reporting on the Guildford and Birmingham 6 campaigns, please. Now, during your deployment, we know that Tom and the Haringey Irish Working Group supported the Guildford 4 and Birmingham 6 justice campaigns, and they campaigned for their release.
Yes.
You touch on these campaigns, or they're mentioned in your reports. I'd like to bring up a report, please, which is UCPI 23820, which is a report dated the 17th of July 1990, and so it's at tab C141. And it starts, paragraph 2, it says, there is regular dialogue between activists within the Birmingham 6, Tottenham 3 and Guildford 4 campaigns. In particular, there is a good understanding between Paul Hill, Gerard Conlon, 2 of the freed Guildford 4, and Sharon Radcliffe of the Free Tottenham 3 campaign, and wife of Engen Radcliffe, 1 of the Tottenham 3. In June 1990, these 3 together with Breda Power of the Free the Birmingham 6 campaign and daughter of Billy Power, 1 of the Birmingham 6, attended a human rights conference in Copenhagen. Although all 3 that this close contact is beneficial, each campaign is in favour of maintaining its own identity. a probable admission that at times it may be expedient for each campaign to be able to disassociate from the others.
Yes.
Where did you get the information in this report from?
I cannot remember.
These campaigns pose no public order problem, did they?
I would have to go back and look at what happened at the time. I don't know. I don't know an answer to that.
Well, there's nothing in your reporting to suggest that they did, in the sense there's no reporting on.
Right. My remembrance of the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4 campaigns when I was reporting on them was that the majority of people thought the wrong people had been convicted.
Right.
So almost certainly I do not remember public order issues at all regarding those two campaigns.
And by the time you wrote this report, actually, the Guildford 4 had been entirely vindicated. Their convictions had been overturned. So these groups, you've agreed there's no public order problem. They're certainly not subversive, are they? In the sense they're single-issue campaigns. Yeah. So what is the intelligence, or what was the intelligence value of reporting on these groups, and specifically on their attendance at a human rights conference together?
Public order-wise, I can't see too much to really be concerned about there. It is something that we've reported on, because certainly there was one live issue there, the three.
What
so
do you mean?
it's still...
Well, you mean that...
Tottenham 3.
Well, the Birmingham 6 hadn't been...
But it was on its way. I think
you could see the way
that was happening very, very quickly. That's once the Guildford 4 were freed, then the Birmingham 6 were going to follow very, very soon for very good reasons.
Why was the fact of cooperation between these three campaigns relevant, as far as you saw it?
Again, because you have individuals here who are obviously they could call up demonstrations, call up public order issues. I don't see the harm in doing it, to be honest with you.
The annual report for 1989 and the STS annual reports, I should say, for 1989 and 1990, they list the Birmingham 6 and Guildford 4 and the Winchester 3 in the list of groups that are described as being directly penetrated or closely monitored. So did STS management direct you to report on these groups when you could? Did they encourage you?
No. It was part of... You could not possibly be involved in issues of Northern Ireland if you didn't have a strong view about those two campaigns.
And STS management, I take it, didn't comment on the propriety of recording on these campaigns? No comment made on that?
No.
Are you aware, HM25, that Peter Imbert, who was involved in the police investigation into the Guildford 4, and I think was involved in the original interrogations, he was the commissioner of the MPS during your deployment? Were you aware of that?
I knew he was commissioner, but sometimes, obviously, when and where passed me by, but I take your word for it.
Yeah, fine. But did you know that he was involved in the investigation, closely involved in the investigation of the Guildford 4?
No, I don't think I did.
So I suppose my question would be, was that was never brought to your attention? You were never made aware that might be...
No, not at all. Not in the slightest. No, it wasn't brought to my...
A reason to report on these campaigns?
No, not at all.
When you say in this report, what were you insinuating when you said each campaign is in favour of maintaining its own identity, a probable admission that at times it may be expedient for each campaign to be able to disassociate from the others? I can't think of this at this time in that respect. Maybe it is because two of the three campaigns were coming to a successful conclusion and they wouldn't particularly want to keep going for the third one. Perhaps it's that. Right. in your witness statement regarding the Birmingham 6 campaign, you say that you reported on them because until the Court of Appeal overturned their convictions, they supported freedom for convicted terrorists. And you also say that there were some questions about how the campaign was funded. But you say you could see the way the wind was blowing on the Birmingham 6, and obviously the Guildford 4 had been released. So was it not your view that actually they weren't convicted? I mean, they were convicted, but they weren't terrorists. They were men who had been wrongfully convicted of terrorist offences.
So you're saying that the use I make of the word convicted, and that was in respect to who?
Convicted terrorists,
Yeah, in
really, is
respect
more,
of
that was your justification for reporting on them.
Yeah, which one?
For the Birmingham 6, this is something you say in your witness statement.
At that time, I suppose they were still convicted terrorists.
But my point is that did you not consider that actually they weren't terrorists? They may have been convicted, but they were men convicted of terrorist offences, and that actually reporting on them was inappropriate.
Am I still right in saying they were still convicted at the time?
They were released during the course of your deployment.
Yeah.
But this is just something you say in your witness statement about reporting on them.
All right, if it's in my witness statement, I shouldn't have used it because, of course, they're not. They were no longer convicted when I made that statement. But I thought you were talking about this.
No, sorry. I'm sorry if
No.
I'm confusing you. It's more just you were asked in your Rule 9 about whether or not what the justification was, and you were saying that was your justification because they were convicted terrorists. But we'll move on.
Right.
You report on Troops Out movement going to the Court of Appeal on the 14th of March 1991 to witness the release of the Birmingham 6. I just want to bring this up briefly and then we'll move on. It's reference UCPI 22246. So it's at tab C167. It's a report dated the 20th of March 1991. At paragraph 3. You say there was obvious jubilation when the men emerged from the court and a mood of self-congratulatory optimism as to the damage done to British justice. What did you mean by celebratory optimism as the damage done to British justice?
Well, as we all know, it was a very long campaign, which obviously ended up with the appropriate result. But certainly within people that I was mixing with, it was taken as this is very much the harbinger of many more court cases wherein people who are convicted will be set free.
And
It was seen as a huge watershed.
And again, in your view, did it prompt any soul searching in yourself or in the SDS about reporting on these groups or the propriety of having reported on these groups?
No, because we are reporting on the groups when the situation is totally different to when they are released. So, no.
Moving on, HN25, to positions of responsibility, just very briefly. You say you were the treasurer of the Haringey branch of Troops Out.
I think so, but I wouldn't be 100% certain.
Can you just give us a brief sense of just what that role involved?
Collecting dues, paying bills. I don't know that I was ever full-time treasurer, but it was probably it's one of those jobs which no one wants to do.
Right.
And so I think it got passed around a fair bit.
And did it give you any power? Like, did you get to make decisions about
No.
spending?
No, that would come from the directions of the meeting.
And did it give you access to more senior members of Tom that perhaps, or senior proceedings in terms of sort of
Not really.
key decision makers? Did it give you access to those sort of?
The main decision
people and
makers in Tom
proceedings?
were in Haringey anyway. So,
Right.
so not really, no, because they were already present.
Right, so it didn't change anything in terms of your access in any material way?
No.
Just briefly, we know that you addressed a meeting of the Troops Out movement on the broadcasting ban,
Yes.
and you say that you sought management's position in advance. Why did you feel you needed to get their permission?
I obviously did, but I can't remember doing it. there was always a slight element of going back to agent provocateur. You've got to be quite certain what level you pitch it. So all I was doing was basically saying that's what I'm going to do, and I wasn't going to say anything that wasn't already out in public record.
And they were content for you to take on this role of treasurer and to speak at this meeting?
Yes, if I asked them, and obviously I did because I've said that, but yeah, they would have been, yes.
Did they encourage you to take on these kind of roles?
Not really, no. You were very much left to make your own way and manage your own campaign.
Briefly, HM25, if we look at reporting on members of Parliament, a number of your reports in your pack contain references to members of Parliament. What did you understand to be at the time the SDS policy on reporting on MPs?
My understanding was you could say they were there as long as you put the word MP down. That was my understanding, because otherwise, if I do not say they're there, there would be a lot of context would be missing, and it wouldn't be the whole truth.
But so you understood that you could report they were there, but did you understand that was the extent of what you should report?
Pretty well, yeah, pretty well.
If I could bring up just briefly the report at UCPI 23802. It's a report dated the 21st of January 1988. And this is a report on a meeting at which Ken Livingstone spoke. And we can see at paragraph 4, I mean, I don't think I need to read it all out, but just a sense of it. The substance of his speech was a reiteration of his belief that British withdrawal from Northern Ireland would be the inevitable culmination of 800 years of British imperialism in Ireland, and conclusion, he believed, which would not be long delayed. He attacked the gross play acting of Mrs Thatcher after the incidents at Harrods and Enniskillen, and criticised the Labour Party for failing to attack this cynicism. The campaign group meeting was alluded to at this juncture when Livingstone mentioned that John Prescott was not standing for the deputy leadership of the Labour Party, and that this would present an ideal opportunity to campaign for the election of a person committed to British withdrawal from Northern Ireland. HM25, this goes far beyond simply reporting the presence of an MP at a meeting, doesn't it?
You're what was giving he at this stage?
Sorry?
What was he at this stage? Because obviously
he was an MP.
Was he?
Yes.
Right. Again, this is what I say, that we mention it because without it, there's no real substance. He was the main person in this, addressing this this particular group of people. He was saying things which I don't think were different to what he said generally. So, yeah, that's what I've done. And there's obviously a bit further than I said, but there's nothing there that wasn't said. And yeah.
We can take that down now, please. I'd like to bring up another report. This relates to another MP, Bernie Grant. It's at MPS 0747077, and it's at tab C66, sir. And if we could go to paragraph 12 of that report. This is a detailed report, HM25, on a political rally held by the Haringey Irish Working Group in 1988. Well, I can read it. I've got a summary here, but it's while the document's brought up. But it reads, while Farrell was speaking, Bernie Grant, the MP for Tottenham, it's paragraph 12, please. The MP for Tottenham arrived from his constituency surgery and then gave the next speech. The first part of his speech was lacklustre and appeared ill-prepared, but he soon warmed to the task in hand and delivered the remainder in flamboyant style. He provided one moment of light relief when he mistakenly used the word castrated instead of castigated. Predictably, he drew comparison between alleged discrimination against black people in Britain and the plight of Irish nationalists in Ulster. So, first, HM25, why did you feel the need to report on the way that Bernie Grant delivered his speech? What was the relevance of its being lacklustre or flamboyant?
Because that's how it was. I can't even remember this one.
Can I ask also what's the intelligence value in reporting that he accidentally said castrated? Would you agree it sounds almost as if you're writing a sort of humorous sketch as opposed to a professional?
Yeah, I can accept that, yes.
And
yes, I can accept
in
that.
retrospect, do you think that's not
In retrospect, definitely, yeah,
appropriate?
definitely.
When you say predictably, he drew comparison between alleged discrimination against black people in Britain and the plight of Irish nationalists in Ulster. Again, why did you see fit to insert into the report your view that his comments were predictable?
Because I'd written a lot of reports regarding this colonial front, and that is why I use the word predictably, because that is part of what I've been reporting for quite some time.
Do you see it sounds quite disparaging? It reads in a disparaging way, as if...
Yeah, well, I think that's in the eye of the beholder, because I certainly didn't mean it in that way.
And when you use words like alleged and plight, again, why did you feel the need to sort of create this distance between you and the matters on which you were reporting? It's not just a simple factual account, is it, of what was said?
I think some people would argue against... people would have views where those two words would be proper. So, yeah, again, it's in the eyes of the beholder.
Do you agree that, well, did you feel it was the SDS style, as it were, to signal in the reporting that the sort of disdains, maybe a little strong, but that negative views towards the people you were reporting on, that was something that was considered desirable?
No, I wouldn't say it was considered desirable. I think it probably happens.
But no one
Has
ever picked...
happened.
Sorry, apologies. But no one ever picked you up on it and said, look, this isn't quite appropriate.
No, no.
Moving on. We'll look now, HN25, at a report. This goes to tone, really, again. A report dated the 30th of May, 1990. If we could bring that up, please. It's UCPI 23816. And it relates to a Tom AGM in Sheffield. And, sir, it's at C137. If we could go to paragraph 14, please. This paragraph reads, prior to lunch, there were separate men's and women's meetings at which the men basically admitted to sexist behaviour and the women continued to bemoan their lot. Can you explain what you meant by the men basically admitted to sexist behaviour?
Well, they would have said, yes, we are guilty of such behaviour.
What was such behaviour?
I can't remember exactly what that was.
And when you say, you talk about proceedings at the women's meeting, but I presume you weren't at the women's meeting because you're not a woman.
No.
What was the basis for your claim that at that meeting they continued to bemoan their lot? Who told you that?
Can't remember.
Is that how they, I mean, as far as you can recall, is that how they portrayed discussions at that meeting?
There would have been a reason why I used those words, so there must have been, in my hearing, a comment saying that, look, yes, this behaviour has happened, and we're not happy about it. But I can't tell you where I got it from or who I got it from or anything like that.
Do you accept that the phrase continue to bemoan their lot is a bit disparaging and sexist?
Yes, I'd accept that.
We'll look at a few more reports on individuals, HN25. There's one dated 11th of September 1990. The reference is UCPI 21871. If we could bring that up. So it's at C145. It's a very short report. And it reads, privacy... Nope, I apologise, this is the wrong report reference. Sorry, if we just bring that up. It's fine, Sorry, can we just bring that up again? 21871. Thanks, it's fine, we'll talk about this report. This reads, if we look at paragraph 2, Privacy of Privacy attended a public meeting held by the Troops Out movement on Thursday, 6th of September at 7:30 at the Unwage Centre. She is interested in the work of Tom and is on contacts list until she returns to West Germany after Christmas 1990. She is studying in London and is described as white, about 5'7", well-built, born circa 1967, and mid-brown untidy collar-length hair. Can I ask, what did you mean by well-built, HN25?
Strongly built.
Is that what that means in the context of describing a woman? Does it mean something a little more along the
what do
lines
you
of
mean?
shapely?
Sorry, I'm not getting this.
Well-built. If you describe a woman as well-built,
Yeah.
is that a reference to having a shapely figure?
No, well built to me meant strongly built.
Can we look at another report, please, which is at MPS 0747250? It's paragraph 5. So it's page 3, yeah. And you describe the woman here as she is approximately 5'8" tall, slim build, pale complexion with straight black hair cut in a bob, is in her mid-20s and attractive. Why did you see fit to record in this report that you found this woman attractive?
I suppose to help with identification purposes in the future.
But it's very subjective, isn't it?
Yes.
So would you agree that it doesn't really help with identification purposes?
I really don't know. I think there is a common standard of what people regard as attractive.
But you wouldn't describe a man as attractive, only a woman. Is that fair?
From my perspective, yes, it's fair.
Did your managers comment on your using this word to describe a woman?
Oh, no, not at all.
Can I ask you this? Were you writing these reports, given that you comment that you wouldn't describe a man as attractive, were you writing these reports very much with a male audience in mind?
No, I was writing them from how I would describe someone. The audience was immaterial.
Would you describe someone as attractive to your wife?
Yeah, quite possibly, yeah.
Or other women, would you describe a woman as attractive? You talk about them in those terms? Well-built, would you say that?
It depends on circumstance. I wouldn't want to upset anybody by saying that if I thought that was going to happen.
So you accept that women might
In certain
have a problem with that?
circumstances, yes, yeah. I think we all tailor our language to the audience and the location we're in.
We'll move now, HN25, to your social activities with other UCOs. You say that there were events like your wedding, that you say Bob Lambert attended, Christmas events, and you say they were optional, but that the managers and other UCOs would not like it if you opted out. How were you aware that they disliked it if you opted out?
I suppose a difference in the warmth of the room, certain intangibles, possibly even comments. I attended every single Christmas event, so it was made, well, certainly I was aware of the fact it would not be well regarded. People did miss Christmas events, and albeit it wasn't roundly criticised, it was certainly, I certainly felt.
You sensed it was frowned upon?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. It's all part of camaraderie.
Is that you've anticipated my next question? Was it frowned upon, you think, because it showed a sort of lack of team spirit, a lack of
Yeah, I would say so.
will to bond, as it were?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And did your wife go with you to the Christmas
Yes.
event? And can I ask, was the tone of, say, the Christmas event where your wives were present very different from the tone or atmosphere at an all-male social event where it was just the SDS officers and the managers?
I hardly attended any events that weren't the Christmas do's, so it's very hard for me to actually comment on that.
Did you go to the pub after the meetings?
Yes, yeah.
And what, just in terms of the kind of exchanges, the tone of the exchanges, would they differ markedly from the tone at the meetings where women were present, your wives, for example?
I suppose they did slightly, but I wouldn't have said hugely. I mean, it depends on the conversation and what the topics are, and the topics tended not to go down the lines of sexism or anything like that. They tended to be about football, about things like this.
Okay, we'll look at that in a little more detail. If we go to the SDS meetings themselves, we've talked about them briefly in terms of when you were in the back office, but now I'm talking about when you were actually deployed. And in your witness statement, you describe the round robin format in which you gave brief updates on your deployments, or not in the case of Stefan Scott. But that also at these meetings, expenses were dealt with, reports were handed in. Is that broadly accurate?
Yeah, that was some of the things that happened, yeah.
But I get the sense from your evidence, also from the annual reports, that those meetings were intended to have a social aspect as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes, to see how people are coping mentally and also to see if there's any warning signs. We certainly felt that there was that it was keeping us grounded in the reality of being members of the Metropolitan Police.
So after the round robin and the expenses were dealt with, then it was time to relax. Was that the idea? That
yes, yeah, there was a dartboard and things like this, yeah.
And you refer elsewhere in your statement to a macho drinking culture at the time. Was that in evidence at those meetings? In the socialising section, at least?
Yeah, it could happen, yeah.
Heavy drinking?
There's certainly enough to push you way over the level of being classified as an alcoholic on that particular day, yeah.
And so did that lead to greater levels of disinhibition amongst the officers?
We probably got louder, but I wouldn't say there was any bad behaviour that I could identify particularly.
Well, I'm referring also to the things that they would say. So did it mean that officers became more...
You're talking about several years ago, and I cannot remember anything that led to particular arguments or no, I don't really remember a great amount of disgusting language or anything like that.
Well, I mean, the behaviour, but the kind of comments I'm talking about wouldn't lead to an argument necessarily, but it would just be crude, let's say, or...
I dare say there was some.
Sexist and...
Yeah, I dare say there was some because, things were... It's almost an anachronism. Things were different then, but I wouldn't have said they were severely at all out of order.
Is it fair to say, HN25, though, that if in your reporting, for example, in a professional document, that you think it's appropriate, and obviously management thought it appropriate, to comment on a woman's attractiveness or perceived attractiveness, or the fact she's well built, although I accept you say that was to do with strength, but I do think it carries another meaning.
Well, it certainly didn't to me.
Okay. Is it fair to say that if it was considered to express yourself in this way in reports, that then in a less formal forum, so for example in a face-to-face interaction, the tenor of the conversation would be far more sexist and bawdy, for want of a better word?
I don't quite know how to answer that because logic says yes, but I just do not remember that being the case. I just don't remember it being the case at all. I don't remember a lot of bawdy talk. People would come and go. I really don't. I dare say people swore a bit more than usual, but I don't remember huge amounts of what I would regard as down at the pub before a football match where people are getting very, very rowdy. I don't recall any of that.
And do you recall any conversation about women in the target groups that
No,
officers were
not at
deployed
all.
into?
No, not at all.
Can I bring up a document? I've forgotten the reference. I can't remember what I did write it down. It's at tab B40, sir. Apologies, I'm just getting that reference. Uh, 0730, MPS, sorry, 0730160. Let me bring that up, thanks. It's not coming up. It's not coming up. It seems to be a technical issue, but I will just read to you what it says and give you a bit of background to it. It was an interview between HN109, who was your DI. We've talked about him earlier in your evidence. And it's an interview he had with officers from Operation Sparkler, who were investigating Bob Lambert's involvement in the Debenhams incendiary incidents. And it took place, the interview, on the 22nd of May 2017, but HN109. Oh, sorry, I apologise. I think I gave you the wrong reference. It's 0737160. And HN109 was talking to investigating officers from Operation Sparkler, but he talked about his time as a manager in the SDS. And sorry, if we could go to the page, second page. Sorry, the page after that. Now, the bit that we are interested in, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 down, but I'll read it. It's a little bit difficult because of the redactions, but it says HN109 stated that they were unaware of any relationships between activists and UCOs. However, there had been jokes made about high standards of intelligence being gained from horizontal politics. The other standing joke was that a Category H deceived woman was not very attractive. If we could just look at those in turn. Do you remember there being a joke at meetings about a prominent activist who was deceived into a relationship with an officer about her not being very attractive?
Not at all.
Would you agree that it's consistent that comments on the attractiveness or not of female activists is consistent with what we saw in your report, for example? So that it's more likely than not, isn't it, that that matter was also discussed in an informal setting of a meeting?
I cannot remember anything of that nature, no. No, I really can't. No.
And I'll ask again, was anything said about this Category H deceived woman in the meetings that you remember?
I remember, certainly I know the name, yeah. But not in that context.
So what was, but when you say you know the name, are you agreeing that it was mentioned in the meetings, this name, it did come up?
Yes, the name was mentioned, yes.
So what was said about her?
I certainly don't remember anything about appearance. I just remember she was mentioned because she was someone who was mentioned regularly because of her activities.
And it was someone who we now know had a relationship with an undercover officer, don't we?
Yes.
So was there any mention of that? Because this would have been at the time when that was happening.
Not in my hearing and not in my remembrance.
Do you recall any jokes being made about high standards of intelligence being gained from horizontal politics?
No.
Do you remember any other jokes pertaining to
Not at
sleeping with activists?
all. No, not at all.
Or obtaining intelligence through sleeping with activists?
Not at all.
And you're saying there was no sexual banter at all?
Not that I
at this
remember,
meeting?
no. I can't say that it didn't happen because I wasn't there all the time, but certainly I do not remember it happening at all. Bearing in mind we were all married men, and as you've pointed out earlier, we all had Christmas celebrations together. People maybe kept such views to themselves, but I do not remember it.
But would you agree that the fact that HM109 has admitted to this, I mean, he said this to investigating officers, so he says it happened, would you not agree that that shows that the culture in the SDS was incredibly misogynistic and sexist?
Well, he obviously was here when it was said, but to say it's incredibly misogynist and sexist from one comment, I don't know that I would apply that adverb.
Well, he said they were standing jokes, so the idea is they were said
Well,
comments
if it
that
was standing
were
joke, I
repeated
didn't hear
again
it.
and again.
I certainly was unaware of it.
But you would agree that that casts a...
That's his perception, and no doubt he heard it. Now, I suppose it's more in your definition of incredibly and pervasive and things like this. Only talking to other people and what they say, will you and I get an idea as to the level of this?
Can we bring up, please, your signed Hearn witness statement, which is the reference MPS 0726824. This is a statement that you made to two police officers from Operation Hearn. We've referred to it previously. Page 1, HN25. It's actually the second part of the first paragraph, and it says, this statement is made in the presence of Detective Sergeant Officer 1 and Detective Constable Officer 2. This statement is solely for the use of the inquiry conducted under Operation Hearn and is not to be disclosed to any other third party, nor the contents to be disclosed to any other third party. And I should say you made this statement on the 12th of March 2013. Can I ask, why did you say that in the preamble to the statement about its use?
Because they told me to, basically. I mean, the statement is made solely for the user. I didn't know it. Yes, conducting Operation Hearn. That was what they said to me, and obviously it's been proved a lie because it wasn't meant to leave the office. So this was almost dictated to me.
Right. So you were given to understand that what you said in this statement would go no further beyond Operation Hearn. It's sort of internal. I mean, it was a police-run investigation.
I mean, I didn't believe them, but yes.
Now, it's correct, isn't it? You've signed this statement.
Yes, I did.
And you signed the bottom of every page. There's a signature. If we could just go to page 4, please. Under the heading Sexual Relationships, you're recorded to have said there was a regular occurrence in respect of sleeping with women. It wasn't regarded as wrong, and at the time the person would have to undertake a dynamic risk assessment. I feel sorry for the woman Bob slept with, who was not a target as such. And there's a lot to explore here, but also in this paragraph you say that it wasn't regarded as wrong sleeping with women. And at the time, the person would have to take a dynamic risk assessment. Now, in your inquiry statement, HN25, you say that this comment about sleeping with women being a regular occurrence was taken out of context.
Yes. I'll give you some background to this, which I think is useful. As we've just said, it was meant to go nowhere fast and not leave the room. I was totally unsure as to what Operation Hearn was and what it was trying to do. The situation was, I think they came at least 3 or 4 times, and at no stage was the statement taken there and then. they would write down, I think we saw earlier in the day, notes. And so this is a statement, and I should have actually challenged a lot of this. I did challenge a lot of it because I've seen the comments where there is a written pen note from myself about a number of things. This was a regular occurrence in respect to sleeping of women. What was happening here was it was a conversation, and obviously the questions are missing. I can tell you quite categorically that the first person that I was aware of had done this was John Dines. Everything, and he was the only one also who the first knowledge of that did not come from the press.
So you're saying when you gave the statement, he was the only person you knew about?
See, I'm not certain when this was made, but so I can tell you how this has happened and what's happened, because it's still the way I feel. It was not a regular occurrence in my view. The first time I heard it was John Dines, and that came because obviously the person involved was following him around.
We'll come to that. We'll come to when you found out about John Dines.
So he was the first one, and everything subsequent that has been revealed, I was totally unaware of until it hit the various organs of the press.
But your comments, as recorded here, suggest a regular occurrence suspect of sleeping with women. So it's women plural. It's not just a woman.
Yeah. Again, I should have actually said no.
But why didn't you? Given that you did, you obviously went through it carefully. I mean, I can take you to the previous.
I actually don't think I did go through it particularly carefully, because there were one or two amendments, and I was getting to the point where I was not really fully understanding Operation Hearn, and also I was wondering what they were up to.
But what does understanding Operation Hearn have to do with it? I mean, the truth is the truth, isn't it? Surely it doesn't.
Yes, it is.
What you say.
Yeah, but when you say to someone that this is not going to leave a room, I'll tell you there that it's missed out the fact that I think that every single, because also there's a league table here of the women I feel sorry for.
Yeah, well, again, we'll get to it.
Well,
but I'll explore that with you, don't worry.
Okay.
I'll give you a chance to speak to that. But is it the case, HN25, that you were being candid here because you didn't think this was going to go any further than Operation Hearn? And that's why you let your guard down?
I can tell, no, I didn't let my guard down at all. I was careless, I was stupid, but I can tell you quite categorically that the first time I heard this had happened was with John Dines, and everything else was through the press. Everything else was.
But nonetheless, you did read it and you did sign it.
Yes, I did, yes.
And this is fairly clear-cut, but fine.
Well, it's fairly clear-cut that I read it and signed it, and I shouldn't have done.
Well, the things you're saying in it are clear-cut, but it's fine. We'll look at it in some more detail. Now, you say that you make this point about making the statement with the benefit of hindsight. But again, the tense in which, I mean, you're talking about clearly how things were, not how you now see them to be with hindsight, because you're using the past tense. So you're saying they weren't considered. It was not an issue. That they probably suspected, I accept, but most knew of it in play.
I certainly didn't.
No, I'm not saying you did, but I'm saying this is what you're saying that management did know, but you're using the past tense. You're not saying, oh, I imagine they did, or you're saying they knew of it in play, in the past, that's how things were.
I think I used, I don't know if it's in this bit, I'm not read it through, I said, I think the actual statement used the word probably. That is far too strong. Well, I would say possibly, and that is purely because of the revelations that are coming and have come since. That is purely with hindsight.
But the fact that taking this at face value, and your comment that sexual relationships with women was not regarded as wrong, that is supported by the facts, isn't it? That a very, very high proportion of SDS officers with whom you overlapped had sexual relationships with women.
Yeah, as would appear, yes.
So in a way, this account you provide here totally fits the reality that we're now aware of. Is
Yes,
that not
but that is
fair?
a total luck. That is not
That's
what I
just a
meant.
coincidence, is it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you explain this comment? You say the senior management team probably suspected these relationships took place and that it was not an issue. Most knew of it in play. Can we just, first of all, what did you mean by it was not an issue? What do you mean by that?
I can't,
Not an issue for whom, I suppose, is the question.
I suppose, the officers concerned and also the management. But that is the place where it possibly suspected that these, probably is a far too strong a word, and that is, as I say, as a result of all the revelations that have gone on since.
So you're saying that that is you projecting back into the past?
That is me making sense of what's happened.
But at this stage, you say you only knew, what you're saying now is that you only knew about John Dines. You didn't know about all the others.
No, that's right. And that statement is made from that period of time. So I'm certain, I thought I put something in like the early 2000s, something like that. It was definitely timed, and it wasn't contemporaneous.
Again, we'll come to that. But also your phrase of, when you say most knew of it in play.
I've got no idea what that means. I think probably I'm saying now that most people do know of it, yeah.
But that's different. I mean, that's very different from most of the senior management team knew of it in play. That's a very
I don't know if that's senior management.
straightforward, SMT, yes, is what it stands for. I mean, that's a very straightforward statement. What did you mean when you said that?
I don't really know. Again, I think I'm making sense of it subsequently because, in my view, the senior management team might possibly have been known, but I don't think they knew the level of what was going on.
Can I suggest something to you, HN25? That when you gave this statement, you were aware that Bob Lambert was in trouble?
I don't know.
You mention it in the statement.
Okay, if I did, then yes. Again, this is the information that's come to me, which has totally changed my viewpoint on what had happened and also what my understanding of the situation was. Totally.
When you were interviewed by officers from Operation Hearn, was it your understanding that, were you still friendly with Bob Lambert at this stage?
When was this?
It's from the 12th of March, I think, 2013.
I don't think I've seen him before. No, I'm certain I haven't seen him in that period of time. No.
But did you stay in touch with him after the SDS?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
You did see him after the SDS?
Yeah,
And when
more
did you,
professionally than socially.
but did you maintain a friendly relationship?
Yes, yeah.
And so when did contact with him fall off?
When he retired.
When was that, roughly?
I don't know. It would have been the late noughties.
Can I ask you this? Is it possible that you were telling the truth in this statement about the situation, and part of the reason for that was because this, in a way, it could be argued, or at least you might have seen it this way, it shows that Bob Lambert wasn't a rogue officer in what he did, that actually he was just doing what lots of officers did and what was considered to be perfectly all right. So that actually this might help Bob Lambert. Is that
No, not at all.
fair?
No.
But is it fair to say you're generally loyal to your police colleagues? I think you made that point earlier on.
No, I'm loyal to people who deserve to be loyal. I deserve to be loyal to. I mean, it's all about the cause and about the beliefs. If I don't think I should be loyal to people of a situation which I disagree with, I won't be loyal.
Looking at a few other details of this statement, HN25, you suggest in this statement, or at least it can be extrapolated, that the main reasons that you ascribe to UCOs having sexual relationships in their undercover identities were operational, shall we say, rather than emotional. Because you say in this statement, we were essentially intelligence gatherers. We were under pressure to deliver most of the time. And you say that in the context of sexual relationships. So can I just explore that with you? What did you mean you were under pressure to deliver most of the time?
Well, you're there to do a job, and in all jobs you should be prepared to work as hard as you possibly can. So that's what I mean there.
But did the managers put you under pressure? Was there a sense, you talked about aggressive management staff, HM 109, was there constant pressure to produce intelligence?
You don't have to be aggressive to actually elicit good work from people. You work because you feel it's what you should be doing, and also you work very often for good managers because you don't feel like you want to let them down. So aggression is very often not the issue.
No, but what I'm saying is, was the pressure you felt that you refer to here, was that internal pressure that you put upon yourself because you had high standards, or was there some element of external pressure to obtain a certain volume of intelligence at a certain rate?
I think you knew if you didn't produce good work, then you would invite pressure. So it's a combination.
How did you know that? I mean, was that a threat? I'm not saying it was given in a sort of sinister fashion, but was there a sense that you had to keep performing at a certain level, or you were...
Well, I think that's something throughout the Metropolitan Police. It is that. If you don't work, then... and I think that's true about most jobs. If you don't work, then people are not going to think well of you.
Does it follow from this statement that we were essentially intelligence gatherers, we were under pressure to deliver most of the time, given that that comment was made in the context of relationships with women, can it be inferred from that the pressure that you felt, or that certain officers felt, led to them sleeping with women in order to assist their intelligence gathering exercise? Is that a fair
No, because
inference?
I don't think this statement is very good.
But you did sign it.
Yes, I did, but
you did get
I
a
wonder
chance to
why
review it.
that's in the sexual relationships sector. I can't say what other officers did. For instance, going back to that dynamic risk assessment, that is me trying to make sense of why they did it.
Right. Okay.
That is all.
That's all it is. That's not based
all it
on.
is.
That's what you're saying. But I suppose all I'm trying to say is, you think that's a plausible. For your understanding, that's why they might have done it, to get intelligence.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly.
And we've touched upon this earlier, but your comment that the view I took is that the person would have been utilised as a participating informant supports the interpretation that essentially that you placed upon it, that officers were conducting relationships for intelligence gathering purposes. Sorry, I'm garbling, but
right.
The point is that my understanding of what you're saying here is that the woman with whom the officers were sleeping, you would have considered her to be a participating informant in these situations. Is that correct?
Find this statement, and I know I've signed it, and I truly do apologise for that, but that to me makes no sense at all. I don't know where participating informant comes from. As I say, notes were written and then a statement was cobbled together. And I think you can see there seems to be a lot of non sequiturs occurring here. And I don't know where that's come from.
Well, you mentioned that phrase in the context of the Blue Book earlier on. So this seems to be a phrase that was commonly used in the SDS, this idea of being a participating informant. But I think earlier you were saying that, that's what SDS officers might consider themselves.
Yeah, quite possibly, but it is beyond the bounds of logic, really.
So you weren't saying that you would have considered women with whom officers slept to be participating informants in an intelligence.
You're saying the women
the women, yeah.
I think what I meant there was the officer.
Right.
because it makes no sense.
But the way it reads, the view I took was that person.
Yeah.
That's an odd way to refer to an officer, wouldn't you agree?
Well, as I say, this report was written from notes, and there's a number of issues, because I can remember the conversation at the time, and I don't remember it verbatim, but certainly this doesn't get a sense of what I was saying.
You also say that officers at the time, so I presume at the time of entering into sexual relationships with women, would have to undertake a dynamic risk assessment. So, again, by dynamic risk assessment, what do you mean? Did you mean that when deciding whether or not to sleep with a woman in their target group, they would have to do a sort of off-the-cuff balancing of the risks of
basically
exposure as balanced against the quality of the intelligence they might obtain?
Dynamic risk assessment is exactly what you've just said. But what I'm saying there isn't that I'm condoning it in any shape or form. I'm just trying to give some sort of explanation as to why they've done it. And I don't think it's right what they've done, but I'm just wondering, is that what they were doing? Thinking, right, okay, this is potentially an awful, morally and legally wrong situation, but is it worth it? That is what I'm saying there.
Well, I say, why are you trying to explain why they did it if you don't know?
Because I was asked by the team. There was a conversation going on here, and that is why it's full of non sequiturs and mistakes and things which are not explained in fullness.
Did you ever consider, was this something that ever came up, the circumstances in which a UCO might engage in sexual activity with a person in their target group? As in circumstances in which the dynamic risk assessment might suggest that it was a good thing to do?
No, because I wasn't going to get involved in that sort of thing, so no.
And you weren't aware of any other officers discussing situations?
No, as I say, the only officers I've been aware of are those which are in the press and John Dines. They're the only ones. I'd say only ones, but obviously there's a lot now. But every time there's a new revelation, it is news to me.
You say towards the end of the statement that you think this is in relation to Bob Lambert fathering a child, and you say, I think bringing a child into this world as part of an operational decision is wrong. Can you explain what you mean by that operational decision? Do you mean that Bob Lambert sleeping with a woman that resulted in a child was an operational decision?
This goes back to what I'm saying about the conversation. My view throughout was it was a totally wrong decision, operationally or not.
But your interpretation is that it was an operational decision. That's your view.
From his perspective, I think quite possibly, yeah, quite possibly. But the view about, I don't think, obviously we talk about positive role models, etc. And I fail to see how bringing a child into the world without him knowing his father is providing a role model in any shape or form.
Can we talk about John Dines briefly? You say that you knew about John Dines when you gave this statement, and that you found out about John Dines before it hit the press.
Uh-huh.
You said in your witness statement that you viewed him as a gong hunter. What did you mean, gong hunter?
Very competitive, would want to be known as someone who had done a great job, both for his own and for other people's purposes. And yes, he was very competitive, yeah.
Competitive with everyone, or particularly with Bob Lambert, or?
I think with everyone, but in particular with those that were on his side of the house.
You mean involved in animal rights?
Yes.
Right. Did the competitiveness go both ways with HN10, with Bob Lambert and John Dines? Did you feel they were both sort of trying to get the supreme
It was more
spot?
overt with John. With Bob, not so much. But that doesn't mean to say it wasn't there.
This reference in your Hearn statement to sexual relationships being part of an operational decision or as a way of obtaining intelligence. Were you aware that John Dines targeted Helen Steele intentionally, that that was something he openly stated he was going to do for intelligence?
No,
You weren't aware of that?
no. Totally different side of the house to myself.
But it was never said in a SDS meeting or at the pub?
Not that I recall at all, no. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I do not recall it.
Now, you say you became aware of their relationship through gossip. Can you give us a little more idea of when that was?
It was certainly more than gossip. Again, dates on the heart. We used to do a system whereby we would be deployed to answer phones in special branch. So it's when I'd come back off the SDS. I can give you no further date than that. Maybe it's in the package. But I received a phone call while on reserve from John Dines. And he was elsewhere in the world.
Right, yeah.
And I knew it then because, as I say, by chance I picked up the phone and he introduced the fact and he was phoning about those issues and I knew it then.
You knew about it already.
I knew about that then.
Can you tell us, please, how you heard? You said it was a bit more than gossip. What did you mean?
Oh, certainly by the time I received that phone call, I was aware that things were being done to mitigate.
But when did you first become aware that he had a sexual relationship with Helen Steele?
Impossible to say. It might have only been a few weeks before that. It might have been a few months, but it wasn't years by any stretch of the imagination.
And how did you become aware?
Because obviously when you come off a unit, there's a number of people who have been on the unit, and it was mentioned that John was having trouble, and the trouble was this.
And what was the general view? Was there a sense of disgust? Were people appalled within
I'll say more
special branch from what you could see?
I'd say more pragmatism and how did it happen?
Were people surprised? Were you surprised?
No, I don't think I was.
Why not?
Because as we said earlier, that realistically these things are likely to happen on occasions. But no, I wasn't surprised, no.
But is there something, was it particularly John Dines, for example, something about him that meant you weren't surprised, something in his character, or?
Not particularly, no. I think it was more the area he was employed, which I think tended to be, as I've said earlier, it was a place of squats, of that sort of living.
Now, please do not mention any names here. But can I ask, when you found out about John Dines, did you talk to any past, or did you find out, or did you have conversations about it with anyone who was either in the SDS at the time or former SDS officers?
Must have talked about it because they were my source of information that it had happened before I received this call from John.
Are you able to say, did any of those people from the SDS, former people, did they give you a sense of how they found out the information?
I would think almost certainly it was John telling them, because he obviously was concerned about his own well-being and safety. So that was my reading of the situation. Whether there was another means of communication, I'm not aware of it. But my feeling was it was from John.
And the view was not from these former SDS officers, that it wasn't discussed. It was more, well, we've got to just sort the situation out. There was no sort of moral
Well, it's impossible to
judgment made.
It's impossible to understand someone, how they're feeling, just from a couple of sentences.
But it gives an indication, though, doesn't it? I mean, of the general attitude.
Not necessarily. I mean, people might have been feeling really angry about it, but it's impossible. It's impossible to say. They might well have been, well, serves him rights. They might have felt what a disgusting thing he's done. But you couldn't gauge. But certainly there wasn't any throwing up of hands or saying that was terrible. There was no obvious, obvious way of doing things. But people react differently.
You did say in your Hearn statement that there was some gossip about the relationship. Is
yeah.
it fair to say that, yes, okay, there was a period when John Dines actually was communicating with the reserve desk about arrangements being made, but that in addition to that, there was some general gossip about the fact that he had slept with Helen Steele?
Oh, yeah. I'm certain when he rang me that I was already aware of it. So, yes, there was.
Right, okay. So can you shed a little more light on that then, please? That what was this gossip? Where did you hear it from? Please be careful with names.
Basically, that the individual concerned was following him to various parts of the world, and that he was upset and that he felt he needed support.
But what about... sorry.
That somehow he wanted it dealt with as best it could.
But was there gossip about the fact that he had slept with her and had a long sexual relationship with her?
I think in the circumstances it was never said, but the reality was I certainly assumed at that time that's what had happened.
You just assumed that? You inferred that? That
yes,
wasn't what was said?
But it wasn't said. I think it was so obvious to so many people it didn't really need to be said.
Can we just talk briefly about Mike Chitty? In your first witness statement, you say that as far as you can recall, you became aware of issues concerning him around the time it emerged he'd gone back to his target group. It's possible that I was told about this before it was formally known, from somebody quoting Andrew Coles or from Andy Coles directly. So when you say issues concerning Mike Chitty, does that mean the fact that he had sex with women in his target group?
I'm trying to remember what was actually said. I seem to remember the main issue was he returned to them.
Yeah, I mean, he did, but
Yeah.
he also did have sexual relationships with women.
Which
in the
obviously
group.
I've seen subsequently in the various media organs.
But did you hear that from Andy Coles? Did he tell you that Mike Chitty had been sleeping with women in his target group?
No. I think again it was. I can't say where it came from, but I do seem to remember hearing it. Certainly.
That he'd had sex with women in his target group. But you can't help us with who,
no,
or where you heard it from.
No.
And what exactly was said? Was it a straight, just he's been sleeping with women, or what was the substance of it?
I've got a feeling it was purely he'd gone back to the group. And I think the subsequent stuff about sleeping with women, I don't know when that came in. It could have been sometime a lot later. But certainly my initial recollection is he had gone back to his group, which was very bizarre behaviour.
And again, can I ask what was the, as best as you can recall, the attitude to his having done this? Was it, again, shock?
Yeah, it was horror.
About going back to the target group? What about him sleeping with women? Were people appalled by that?
Horror about him going back.
Right, and what about sleeping with
women? I don't think it was laid out in my initial information that he was sleeping with women.
In your Hearn statement, you refer to, so we're changing topics slightly,
Okay.
You refer to the SDS selection procedure as amateurish. And you say, we should have taken more people with a good heart as there were some basic errors in selection procedure. You make a similar point in your witness statement where you say that some UCOs were not selected according to the right criteria. So can I ask, when you say people with a good heart and the right criteria, are you talking about honesty, moral integrity?
Yeah, predominantly, yes. That's what I mean. And also, I know we've talked about loyalty and the object of loyalty, but I think I would want to see loyalty to a proper way of doing things. And that's what I was getting at. People who would do things properly and who would not act wrongly.
So can it does it follow from that that these officers like HN10, HN5, John Dines, Bob Lambert, you consider those officers not to have a good heart? These are the ones who, I mean, using your phrase.
Certainly now, yes. How it happened, I don't know, but certainly I do not regard their behaviour as in any way acceptable.
And why, if this doesn't seem like an obvious question, why do you think it was important to have a good heart if you worked in the SDS?
I think it's important because you understand viewpoints which may not be the classic Metropolitan Police viewpoint. You understand someone's attitudes may be slightly different to your own. And I think, going back to initial question about honesty, I think that is the crux of the matter. And if you haven't got honesty, then I wouldn't say you've got a particularly good heart.
We need to take a short break here now, sir, please, for the stenographer. It might be a good time.
Indeed we do. We've been going for 2 hours. How much longer do you have?
Not much longer. I would say 20 minutes.
Plus a quarter of an hour for the Rule 10 exercise.
It might be even less than 20 minutes, actually, sir.
Okay. Right, we'll break for a quarter of an hour. before you resume, may I say something now before I forget to say it later? Lindsey German was to have given evidence this afternoon, but because we've overrun somewhat for understandable reasons, she will now be giving evidence on Thursday, when the whole day will be available to her if it is needed.
Understood. HN25, I just want to ask you a quick question, going back to the topic of John Dines. When you referred to the gossip, finding out about or hearing about rumours about him and Helen Steele and their relationship and gossip around that, and you discussing it with former SDS members and current SDS members, can I ask, now be very careful with names please, you've got a cipher key in front of you, can I ask, was one of those people with whom you had those conversations, was HN53, please don't say the name, but was HN53 one of those people?
I don't think so.
Can you, looking at that key, are you able to identify the person? If the name's in red, don't say it. Are you able to identify the people with whom you had those conversations?
I've got an idea about who it might be, but I wouldn't be able to say 100% that's the case. Just look at the persons. I can't say the name.
You can't see them on the list.
No, I can see on the list.
You can see them, but can you give us their nominal, please?
It's one of these that I'm not allowed to.
Yeah, but can you write it down?
Oh, right,
then,
okay.
Please,
Yeah, I understand that.
Thank you.
But I wouldn't say 100% that is the person.
Thank you, HN25. And can I ask, was Bob Lambert one of the people that you had those conversations with?
Quite possibly, yeah, quite possibly.
And can you remember what he had to say about it?
I think about the circumstance of what was happening.
You mean the fact that Helen Steele had tracked
Yes.
John Dines down?
Yeah, yes.
Anything about the sexual relationship?
No, but again, I think it was by that time accepted it had taken place.
But did he refer to it at all?
No. Not that I remember. But I think it was accepted. It was a romantic liaison.
If we could talk a little more about...
Do you want to see the slip?
Yes. Yeah, yes, please, sorry. If we could go back to Bob Lambert briefly. We've already established you were friendly with him, he came to your wedding, and that your contact with him fell off a bit in later years.
Yes.
Post his retirement. You talk about him again in this Hearn statement that we've referred to. I don't think we need to bring it back up again. I think you're familiar with it, but in the section on sexual relationships with women, in the context of his sexual relationships, you say such matters were not told to senior management. And I infer from that HN25 that you meant such matters, by that you meant sexual activity with women. Is that what you meant?
Yes. Yeah, but obviously I was unaware that these things were taking place. This, again, is probably a hindsight issue. And the fact that they weren't told to management simply reflected the fact that I was unaware of them.
I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware now, but there is evidence that Bob Lambert actually did tell DCI Waite and did tell DCI Barber.
No, I'm not aware of that.
You weren't aware of that at the time, didn't hear any
No.
of that at the time?
No.
But does it follow from this comment, when you said such matters were not told to senior management, does it follow from that such matters would be discussed with junior management?
No, it's just that probably, if this is from Hearn, it probably was said in response to a question, did the senior management know? I don't know, was it Hearn that this was about? But no, it doesn't mean that at all. I think you've got to be seen in context, and it would have been in response to a question.
So your evidence is that you heard nothing about Bob Lambert's sexual relationships, nothing about his fathering a child with a woman in his target group until it hit the media.
Yes.
So despite your friendship with him, not even a whisper.
No, none at all. I was absolutely stupefied.
You're absolutely sure you heard nothing at all?
Absolutely positive.
When you say you were stupefied, why were you stupefied?
I didn't think he would have done it personally.
Why not?
I just thought he was a person with higher morals than that.
And there was nothing about the way that he conducted himself that you saw that indicated he might be capable of this?
No.
In your signed Hutton statement, again, in the context of sexual relationships with women, you say, I feel sorry for the woman Bob slept with who was not a target as such. Can I ask, who do you mean by that? Do you mean the woman who fathered his child? Or do you mean maybe Belinda Harvey, who was...
The names don't mean a thing to me, but I will explain. I've particularly... And this is where I think the Hearn statement has to be most definitely put in context. I feel great sorrow for all the women concerned. And I felt particular sorrow for that one, who wasn't a member of any group. I know I shouldn't do, but unfortunately I felt she was doubly wronged.
But can I ask, do you mean then that if she were a target, then somehow she was fair game?
No, not at all, no.
So why do you feel particularly sorry for the woman who was not, as you say, a target?
I suppose it's the element of innocence.
But that's suggesting that a woman who's in a target group somehow isn't innocent and somehow deserves it. Can you see that?
I can see what you're saying, but I'm just saying that, in my opinion, all however many it was were terribly treated. But I just can't make any sense of why he would go and behave that way with someone who didn't seem to be even furthering what he was doing.
But this goes back to your point that these women were seen as sources of intelligence. That's what you think.
Yeah, most definitely. That's what I think he thinks.
And again, what is your reason for thinking that's what he thinks?
Because obviously he was successful in his field.
In the handwritten notes of your Hearn interview, and these again, they're not your notes, they're made by the interviewing officers, there's a note which reads, I can bring it up if I need to, but I think it's probably sufficient just to do it this way. There's a note which says, knew of several children mid-2000s. Do you remember that being something that you said?
I can remember seeing it. As I say, the only child I was aware of, and I think there have been some more since in the press, the first one that I was aware of was Bob Lambert. And whenever that hit the press, that was the first one. So if I'm saying mid-2000s, then I'm wrong.
It didn't come out because it didn't come out in the mid-2000s.
Okay.
It came out in 2012.
Okay, well, it's 2012 then. That is the first time I was aware of a child.
But can I say then, can you explain why the note reads knew of several children? Because that's more than one child. That's what the note says. That's what the note says. I mean, I can bring it up if you want to look at it.
Yeah, but that's not in my statement.
No, it's not. No. To be fair, it isn't in your statement.
In truth, then, I think, obviously, I would have thought he would have put that in the statement if he felt that was right.
Right.
I just don't see why he wouldn't, because it's as obviously you're showing here, it's a very incendiary statement.
So you weren't aware of other children being born to STS UCOs?
At that stage, no.
You hadn't heard any rumours about HN67, for example, fathering a child?
No.
I'm just going to confirm for the transcript that when you wrote that note, that the nominal that you wrote on the note was HN83. I just want to return briefly, I'm sorry to jump around the place, HN25, but just to something before I forget. When you talked about your deployment into troops out movement and saying that you came across people who definitely, I think your exact words were, I do think there were people, yes, that I would say have assisted terrorists, definitely. Now, without naming any names, can I ask you this? How could you say definitely that you were interacting with people who assisted terrorists?
Because of their associations. And as I say, I was deployed on a couple of occasions.
No, I understand that. Yeah. Oh, sorry, have we covered this? Am I going back over old ground? I am, sorry. It's bad note-taking. Apologies, HN25. We don't need to get back to that. If we go to another topic briefly, is, just bear with me. Can I ask you about your contact with other SDS officers? We've touched upon it in relation of HN10. But in these handwritten notes of your Hearn interview, it's we should bring this up actually, it's not very easy to read. And the Hearn interview is MPS 0738048. So that's at B39. On page 2, I'll tell you what it says. It says something like, aware of 2 who broke down, got payment, one of which speaking to The Guardian, not spoken to SDS men since retirement, only last to network, sleeping with women to see what was done. Now, obviously, they're not fully formed sentences. But does this sound familiar to you? Do you remember saying, just taking it bit by bit, aware of 2 who broke down, got payment, one of which speaking to The Guardian? Yeah, is that a reference to, sorry?
That makes sense to me, yeah.
Was that a reference to Peter Francis?
Yes.
And thank you. And it's at the bottom of the page, is the bit where it says, not spoken to, I think it says, SDS men since retired, only last to network sleeping with women to see what was done. Can I ask, does that mean that you contacted SDS men to talk about the line on sleeping with women? The line to take?
Not at all, not in the slightest. I can't really fully understand what that means, but I can tell you what the situation is. I have lost contact, I think, with practically everybody I worked with, not because we've fallen out, it's just the way the world goes. I suppose I'm saying there that the only way I keep some sort of knowledge is what's appearing in the press, because I can't make sense of it otherwise.
But have you had any conversations with your former SDS colleagues since this inquiry was set up, for example? What happened?
Just one, and it's been predominantly about the procedures of this process. There's no talking about women. There's nothing new come to me that I wasn't aware of through the press.
Can I ask you to write down on a piece of paper who that person is that you've spoken to?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, HN25. And what about when the revelations hit the press, HN25, about Bob Lambert and John Dines? Oh, sorry, I apologise.
So So sorry, you're going to write something down on a piece of paper first, I think.
Yeah, okay.
There's two
Sorry,
things
I'm
in order.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
HN25, what about after the revelations hit the press? Did you speak to people?
I suppose it gets split into two time periods. One time up until the point of retirement and subsequently. Prior to retirement, I can't think how many people I spoke to about it. There would have been only one or two because obviously it was still not many people would know what I was talking about. So
this officer, HN19, I believe, is written on the piece of paper. That's someone you've spoken to since the inquiry started. Did you speak to him about... 90. Oh, 90, sorry. Apologies. I misheard. HN90.
yeah.
Was he someone that you spoke to when the sexual revelations came out in the press?
Yes. Yeah.
And can I ask what was said about it then? Was he equally surprised as you?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Was there anyone you spoke to after the revelations came out who wasn't surprised, who knew?
I think I've only spoken to, and you're probably going to ask me what
I am, I'm afraid.
who they are. I spoke to one other, and again, total surprise.
Total surprise. So there were no conversations in which someone said, oh, no, I knew
No,
about that?
not at all, not at all. Thank you.
HN25, I'm going to move now on to welfare as a topic. You said in your witness statement... Yes, it's for the sake of the transcript, the name that HN25 wrote on the piece of paper was not name, the nominal was HN122. Yes, so if we turn to welfare, you said in your witness statement there was no real arrangement for monitoring your welfare when you were in the unit.
Yes.
And you say that even HN109's visit to check up on your cover accommodation was to check up on the accommodation rather than on you.
That was my view, yes.
Yes, and you were aware of that because I feel I've read somewhere that those visits were referred to as welfare visits, but are you saying that's a misnomer?
Well, they only occurred the once.
Fine. Can I just ask you just to deviate very briefly, when HM109 visited you at your accommodation and you said when you were giving the reasons you thought that happened, you said, I think there were occasions in the past where cover addresses were not occupied by the person who said they were there. Was that a reference to Stephen Scutt or was that something else?
Stephen Scutt was definitely the one I was thinking about.
That's who you were thinking about. There were no other cases as far as you're aware of officers
No,
not being...
Not I'm aware of, no.
Not living in the addresses that they said they lived in. You say in your witness statement that you understood you were expected to look after yourselves as officers in the SDS and that you could, if you could overcome the mistrust, each other. And that there was a concern amongst UCOs that any welfare issues would be taken as weakness and could lead to a premature end to your deployment. So was this a concern you personally had?
No, I didn't, but having seen the way the world works and also in what was, I suppose, a lot more macho environment than it is today, the Metropolitan Police, you're always slightly concerned that any sign of weakness could be construed as a reason to move you on. And
what was this something that you just inferred from the macho culture, or had you seen examples of officers
who... It's not just the SDS. I mean, it's throughout the MPS at that time. And sometimes, obviously, you've got to say it's actually the right thing to do where someone is struggling, and to move them on would be the right, proper thing to do.
But it was your impression from things you observed that this inhibited officers and prevented them from opening up about?
Possibly only the officers themselves could answer that one.
You weren't aware of any officers having emotional problems during your time in the SDS, that they were making a deliberate decision not to share with managers?
I think people kept things to themselves, yeah.
Even from other officers?
Yes.
In your Hearn interview, your signed Hearn interview, you state that there was a tension between being a cop and being an SDS officer. Can I ask, what was this tension as you saw it?
The way I saw it was you were part of a top secret organisation which was not widely known within the Metropolitan Police Service. That obviously you have spent time in other places other than Special Branch, and the problem could arise whereby you would fall into the company of someone that you knew, for instance, in uniform.
Right. So the tension, you mean, is more just as a sort of practical thing, that you might be compromised or exposed?
There's no tension as respect to looking down on other elements of the Metropolitan Police, and certainly in my opinion, anything but.
Right. You also said it was felt that going back to the yard was going back to the enemy. Can you explain what you meant by that? Is that a reference to a kind of Stockholm syndrome in SDS officers?
I suppose that I can say that one of the biggest transformations and one of the biggest days, or I suppose a couple of weeks of adaptation, was going back to New Scotland Yard and to a very disciplined background, yeah.
Why the enemy, precisely? I'm not saying did you feel this personally when you went back to Scotland Yard?
I didn't feel they were the enemy, no. I mean, that's probably just a phrase that I would use at that moment in time, because at that time, the people I mixed with did regard the police as the enemy to a great extent.
And can you tell us why they did? What was your impression of why they considered going back to?
Well, they obviously weren't very happy with the status quo, and the police are regarded as upholders of the status quo. That really.
And you think they were unhappy with the status quo because of their experiences working undercover?
Oh, sorry, I've misunderstood your question. No, I think everybody felt the adaptation was difficult, and I don't think other officers, they probably wouldn't use the phrase enemy. They just would have said, it's going back to the straight and narrow and things like that.
And a more sort of regimented reason.
Yeah. No, I thought you meant the people I was mixing with.
Now, in the annual reports from the time you were deployed, there is some acknowledgement of this difficulty of assimilation. There's a reference to it. Again, I don't need to bring it up, but I can read it. It's from para 17 of the 1988-1989 annual report. And it's referring to welfare provision. It says, procedure for supervising and counselling former SDS officers on their return to a normal work routine takes place every 3 months up to a period of 3 years. Experience has shown that the first few weeks of an officer's return are the most traumatic, and since August 1988 it has been policy for each officer to be seen at the end of the first 2 weeks on the return to normal duties to assess any particular problems. Was that your experience?
I can't honestly remember. I think it might have been. I think they might have seen me after 2 weeks, but I really can't fully remember that.
In your witness statement, you don't think it was your experience, but are you saying something different now?
No, I'm saying I certainly didn't see much of them.
Right.
But certainly I would have seen them. I'm certain I would have seen them once. Now, whether that was 2 weeks or not, I don't know.
And was that okay? And did you yourself suffer any difficulties of assimilation? Did you feel you would have benefited from more contacts?
No, I don't think I did particularly, because I always took the view that I'm going back one day, and if you've worked that out, then things become easier. Certainly did for me.
Just on the topic of welfare, if we could just talk very briefly about Stefan Scutt. We've mentioned him already in the context of the accommodation matter. You mention him in the context of the twice-weekly meetings, and you say that he would not contribute during the round robin. you say that I recall Stephen Scott would not share any information about his group. His main contribution was maintaining cover. We were siloed and regarded everyone else as a threat, including each other. I just want to explore this briefly, this idea of a threat. The handwritten notes from your Hearn interview, there's also a noted comment of yours which says jealous of own territory. So can I ask, when you talk about this sense of threat, is that a professional threat in that you felt competitive with the other officers and that they were going to encroach on your...
Yes, an element of that.
Yeah.
It was your territory. You were in charge of it. You were giving all the information. And if someone else was involved in something similar to yourself or was moving across towards where you were, then yes, you would feel a sense of threat, yeah.
Defensiveness.
Yes, you would, yeah.
Was it in any sense a threat of compromise? You thought they might put your security at risk?
No, I think it's probably pride as much as anything.
And so was it your impression that that's why Stephen Scott revealed nothing in the round robins? Because of being jealous of his own intelligence, as it were? He wanted to guard it.
Impossible
closely.
to say. Impossible to say. Really, he was definitely someone who was a big character.
Yes, we'll get into that a little bit. Just a little longer on this question of the lack of trust. You refer elsewhere in your statement to the possibility of overcoming the mistrust you had in one another. Are you referring to this same
Yes, yeah.
impulse, this
Yeah.
sense that these officers were professionals? So that's all that's what you mean by that
You're
mistrust?
obtaining information and you don't want anybody to be aware of information about you, I suppose, is some of it.
Did management ever challenge Stephen Scott about the fact he refused to disclose information about what he was up to?
Not initially, no. Not that I'm aware of, no.
But before everything came to a head, was there acrimony? Did you witness any sort of acrimony between him and his managers?
No.
You say he was a very large character. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? What do
He
you
was
mean?
someone who certainly, I think, regarded himself as the main person in what we would call the field, which is obviously the officers operating. He just regarded himself as, I suppose, numero uno, to use those expressions we used to
What
use.
gave you that impression?
Oh, his bearing. There was a certain arrogance in the way he carried himself.
You say in your witness statement you understood that he left after an adverse annual qualification report.
Well, that was stated to us.
Right. Is that what you were told then
That's
at the time?
what we were told, yeah.
And can you explain, how were you told? Were you called into a meeting? Was there a sense of a sort of emergency, or how was it imparted to you?
It was at a meeting at the home address of one of the management.
That's when they told you Stephen Scott was had
Yes,
gone.
yes.
So you had no prior notice of it?
I'm trying to think. It might have been told to us a week before, maybe.
Right.
And certainly the meeting I've just alluded to, I think, was much in the way of justification as to that decision having been made.
Right.
That's how I seem to remember it.
So, because we can see from the evidence, not your evidence, but other evidence, that there was a period where Stephen Scott was told he had to leave. He was dismissed from the unit, but he was given a period in which to disentangle himself from the field, for
Yes.
want of a better word. Were you at all aware in that sort of hiatus period
No.
that he'd been asked to leave?
No, the first thing I heard was he was gone, and then the justification occurred, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks later, I don't know.
So, were you aware that he went absent without leave in between that period? So during that period when he'd been told he was leaving, but he hadn't actually exfiltrated himself from the field, were you aware that he'd gone missing, that he hadn't rung into the office?
Yes, I was, but I couldn't say at what period it was. But certainly I was aware he had gone missing for a period of
Right,
time
but-
around that time.
But you're not sure whether or not you knew it at the time it was happening?
I was aware that
Right.
he was AWOL, for want of a better phrase.
And again, how were you aware? Were you told by management?
Yes, I've got a feeling it was in that justification meeting. Unless I'm totally wrong, but that is my remembrance.
What was the sort of attitude, for want of a better word, of surrounding the fact he'd gone AWOL? Was it presented in a very sort of... Was there a sense that everyone was panicking?
I wouldn't have said panic necessarily. I just think it was people trying to explain the reasons behind the decision.
Right. And so you were given to understand they considered him a security risk, such that...
No, the justification was purely an adverse APA.
But
the reasons for the APA, the adverse APA, we were not aware of.
Right. But what I mean is the fact that you were meeting at managers' houses, you were told that was because of Stefan's stuff.
Yes,
So was it
yes.
told to you then that he was considered a security risk?
Yes, yeah.
And did you have a view on that?
My view was it was quite bizarre behaviour and that I could understand people being worried.
Had you seen, in the period before he left, did you see any signs in him of depression or anything that stood out for you?
Prior to him being told to go, no, I didn't see anything.
In your witness statement at paragraph 142, you say that you believe that the superintendent in charge of whichever squad SDS was aligned with at the time, so I think you were in C squad at the time. No, you're in, S squad at the time. You moved into C squad in September 88. You believe that the S squad superintendent visited you in response to the Scott affair. So that would suggest it was Superintendent Anthony Evans. Does that sound right?
Yes, he was certainly around at that time, but I do not recall the meeting.
Well, that was going to be my next question. You
Yeah,
don't
I
remember
don't
anything
recall
about that
the
meeting,
meeting.
what
No.
he said?
No.
Can I ask you this? Did you have a sense that it was a sort of morale boosting meeting, as in to try and reassure everyone, or was it more of a...
Well, I think now, I don't really know, I wasn't aware of it. I'd forgotten it. No doubt I was there, but I really
You can't
don't.
remember what took place.
No.
You say about Scott that he had support from other officers, but that the remainder of you did not feel he deserved your support.
That's probably putting it... Yeah, I can understand that phraseology, but it's probably a little bit too strong. He certainly had what I would regard as a defence committee.
Yeah.
And the other officers were very much saying, look, we don't know what this is all about. We've got no idea, so let's just keep our own counsel.
Fine. So it's not that you had antipathy towards him as such. You just didn't want to get involved.
No, we didn't know really what the grounds were other than this APA. So until you know that, then...
Yeah. And you had no great relationship with him particularly? I mean, what was your relationship like with him?
It was okay. It wasn't antagonistic, but yeah, I wasn't going to get involved in something I didn't have the knowledge about.
We'll move briefly on to HN4. You're aware after he left the unit, after you left the unit, he was arrested for drink drive, and you became involved in his welfare briefly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can I ask, why did you get involved particularly?
I was unaware of it until an officer phoned me up to say this has happened, and that was why. And yeah.
But why you particularly?
I think I don't really know. I know the officer who phoned me had good relations with him, and maybe he just needed someone to help out. I don't know.
And you were happy to do that?
Yeah. Yes. Obviously. Yeah.
In the note of that conversation that you had with him, again, it's not a note from you, it's a note from Bob Lambert. You were recorded as having reported that HN4 attributed the emotional problems he was having and his problems with alcohol to the time he spent in the SDS. Was that correct? Was that your understanding of what he said?
I can't remember, but I would think that's probably the same. I cannot remember saying that, but yes, I would say that is That's probably what he did say, yeah.
During that meeting, did you get any sense of exactly what it was about his time in the SDS that was causing him distress
No,
after the event?
no.
Did he mention anything about getting beaten up by police?
No, definitely not.
Just bear with me very briefly, HM25. Just very briefly, this is the last topic, HM25. So we'll be over soon. Please be very careful when we talk about this topic about names. But I just want to ask you briefly about the mentor scheme.
Yes.
And your involvement in it. You mentored over quite a long period, 6 years. Is that correct?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yep.
Quite possibly.
And you mentored 3 UCOs. No, don't need to identify them. Can I ask, why did you volunteer for this scheme?
I'm not certain if I volunteered or whether I was asked.
Okay.
But whichever way, then I was willing and more than willing to do it, yeah.
And why was that?
I just felt that you don't like to if they feel you can do some good, and they feel you've got something relevant to say, then I think it's important that you do that.
And did you feel this was something that was necessary, that was a positive development in terms of...
Yes, the opportunity, certainly, yes. What people do with it is up to them, but yes.
In a document relating to the mentor scheme dated the 7th of April 92, it reads, the scheme is intended to enhance the existing monitoring of officers' welfare and that of their immediate families. It's accepted that operational matters will arise during conversation and that advice as to best practice will be given. Mentors are advised, however, that methods may have changed since their time in the field and that any apparently controversial matter should be referred to the SDS, DCI or DI. Can I just ask, were you given any training or information regarding the way in which operational methods may have changed since your time in the SDS? I mean, this wasn't that long afterwards.
I remember having, there was a meeting with several of us that were involved in the scheme. Now, whether during that meeting these things were brought out, I don't know.
And you question the efficacy of the scheme. You say your first mentee, you think it worked quite well.
Yes.
But the 2 that followed it worked less well.
Yes.
And is that because you felt they were unwilling to confide in you, because they assumed that everything they said to you would go back to management?
Quite possibly. And I knew that the first one for longer than the other 2.
The minute I referred to previously, there's a reference in it as well to after each meeting that mentors have with their mentees to reporting back to the DI or DCI. But you say that this fell into abeyance and that welfare reporting sort of fell off. Is it fair to say that the scheme, as it was described and actually what happened in practice, or at least the intentions of the scheme, but then how it played out, were not really at one?
Yes, I think it certainly was a lot more highfalutin and high-sounding than the reality.
Thank you, HM25. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
I'm afraid your time is not quite over yet. We have a last process under which any further questions from other core participants may be put through counsel to the inquiry to you, and your counsel may have questions in re-examination. But you're almost there.
Thank you.
15 minutes.
Just a few very
Yes.
questions. HN25, you referred to Chris Hyde, who was a DS in the SDS when you were there. You said that he engaged in banter and in being one of the boys. Can I ask, what did you mean by banter? What was this banter?
He was an amusing chap. Was funny. He was often the butt of much of the humour rather than handing it out. It was someone that people enjoyed being in the company of.
When you say one of the boys, was the banter...
No, it wasn't. No, one of the boys, as in, you felt like the rank wasn't really that important to him, and that he was of a level with you.
You also referred in your evidence to the temptation to which anarchist living arrangements would give rise to, and you returned to this later. Can I ask, what was the source of your understanding about these living arrangements?
I was aware that's how they lived, but
From
a lot of
whom?
it,
Sorry.
people that were in the anarchist side of things. The supposition has come of that's where most of the transgressions have occurred, and that is me putting two and two together and coming up with that. I think that was a particularly dangerous area to be.
But that was your own theory. It
That
wasn't
is my
based on
theory.
anything John Dines said, for
No,
example, about...
no, not at all. That is me thinking logically.
Or anything that Bob Lambert
No,
said.
no.
That's just something you
Yeah.
inferred. So it didn't come out. There was no conversation about this at SDS meetings, for example, about the anarchist living arrangements or...
We knew they lived in squats because obviously there would be things like some of the accommodation, the council would go in and try and retrieve them, things like that. But no, not as regards what we're talking about here, no.
John Dines actually lived in a squat for a period. Did you know that?
Yes,
He was in the
yeah, because
SDS.
I'm certain it was one of these that the council were trying to reoccupy.
And so, but he didn't mention anything about the specific temptations
No.
that were presented
No.
by this living
No.
arrangement. Do you think the reason you came to this conclusion was because of stereotypes about the kind of women who were being reported on in those anarchist groups?
No, I've come to that opinion because trying to make sense of what's happened. And there is almost a profile as to the people that have done these things, and they tended to be in the stroke anarchist side of things.
Just briefly moving on to another topic, in your witness statement you refer to two managers who were from the T3 period. That doesn't mean anything to you, but they're a later period, so I didn't ask you about them, and I'm just going to ask now. I believe you crossed over briefly with HN67, if you want to look at the cipher key. He was the DI
Yes.
from July 91, so you weren't managed by him for long.
Okay.
A few months. Can I ask, you say in your witness statement that he was DI when you left. He was unable to stand up to superior officers, in particular HN86. What do you mean? Can you provide an example of
HN86.
that? HN86, you need to look up.
Well, HN86 was obviously in superior rank. But there are times when sometimes you feel that a wrong decision might be made, and that certainly your viewpoint should be put, and he didn't seem capable of doing that, but I can't remember on what particular thing.
Well, I was going to say, are there any particular
No,
instances
I can't think
that
of
you
particular
recall?
incidents. He was very much seen by myself as someone, right, if this comes down from up on high, it's not going to stop. It's going to keep coming down.
Right, that he wouldn't defend you against HN86, is that
Yeah, it might not even be defended. You just know it's going to come. There's not going to be any discussion around it, and he's not going to put in a viewpoint one way or the other.
And I mean, did you feel there was a need for someone to stand up to HN86?
I think stand up is
HN86's behaviour that...
Yeah, I think that's a very confrontational way of putting it. I think there's always value in giving your opinion as long as it's given properly and it is of value. And that's where I think maybe that didn't happen.
You mean in being able to challenge someone legitimately?
Yes, yeah, you might think that's a wrong course of action.
Just turning to H86 briefly, you say about him, he was DCI when I left, he was not as capable or inspiring as Martin Gray, and was not good at dealing with crises or hiding his emotions when under stress. He was far too willing to shift blame elsewhere than accept responsibility. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
I think in many ways he suffers quite strongly from my opinion of his predecessor. I probably wouldn't be quite so, I suppose, strong.
Critical, because you like, in
now,
contrast with Martin Gray.
I thought Martin Gray was a very, very good officer. I thought he was an outstanding officer, and I think anybody that followed him would have not been shown in the best light.
When you say he was not good at dealing with crises, what did you mean by that?
I have seen him at times get quite irate and show his feelings, which isn't something which you want to see necessarily in a senior officer, because even if they don't know what they're doing, you want to think that they know what they're doing.
Would he swear and insult
No,
officers?
no, it wasn't that way. No, it was just almost petulance.
And there have been allegations that he was racist. Can you...
I've not heard that at all.
Assist with that
I have
at
heard
all?
no racist comments whatsoever from him.
Just your final comment on HN86, you say he was far too willing to shift blame elsewhere than accept responsibility. Can you give an example of that? What do you mean by that?
I think I remember him losing his warrant card, and I think he blamed it on us for some reason for not seeing it going missing.
He blamed it on the UCOs.
Yeah, because we were out, and his warrant card went missing, and we didn't quite understand why we got the blame, because it wasn't in our pocket. And it just seemed, look, if you've lost a warrant card, then don't go looking for someone else to give the blame on it.
Okay, that is it now, HN25. Thank you very much. There are no further questions.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm afraid you've had rather a longer day than you may have expected when you
Yeah,
started,
absolutely.
but it is now over, and thank you for the assistance you've given me.
Thank you, sir.
We'll resume again at 10 tomorrow.